Hey, welcome to episode 32 of Credit 101. In this episode, we're going to talk about reviewing your credit reports for errors, incomplete data, and also prohibited information. So, some information should not be on your credit report. So, let's go ahead and review this information. If you guys have any questions, definitely let me know. If so much information that shouldn't be on there, I made sure that I had notes right here just to make sure that I don't miss anything. So, make sure you guys take notes on this because if you hear something like, oh, that's on mine, check that off or write this down, okay? Because you need to know, okay, this is what I need to get removed. So when it comes down to personal information, you have to make sure that any incorrect names that's on there, sometimes if you get your credit report from Experian, you'll see additional social security numbers, date of birth, phone numbers. All this information should not be on your credit reports. It needs to be removed. Also, you may see addresses. Remove those addresses from your credit reports. You can call the credit bureaus and tell them to remove it. You can send a dispute letter in if you want to tell them to remove it, but it needs to be removed from your credit reports. And also incorrect or missing information or your employment. Sometimes you see in your employers on there. If you want to remove that, you can have it removed if it's outdated. Okay. So make sure you get this information removed. Also, incorrect marital status. If you have a marital status on there since you're married or whatnot, or your current spouse on there, and you're not married anymore, that information needs to be removed from your credit reports. And I tell people a lot of times when you're repairing your credit, you want to get this personal information removed right away because those additional addresses, social security numbers, and all those different date of births are probably the reason why you still have those negative accounts on your credit reports because they're going to be attached to those accounts. And you're going to see that a lot with Experian because Experian is going to have like identifiers on these different accounts. Sometimes you call them and tell them to remove an address. They're going to say, no, we can't remove it because it's attached to an account. It's like, what do you mean it's attached to an account? It should be attached to me, but it's not necessarily attached to you as account attached to those accounts. So you need to get them removed. Now, when it comes down to the public records, any bankruptcy that was filed by your spouse and not including you, they should not be in your on your credit reports. Also, any lawsuits that you are not involved in, that's on your credit reports. Any criminal records that are more than 7 years, they should not be on there. Paid judgments. We talked about judgments, tax liens, and all those different things. They shouldn't be on there. Also, so make sure you check these different things. And any don't forget bankruptcies. If it's outside the time frame, Chapter 7 can stay on there for 10 years. Chapter 13 is going to stay on there for 7 years. If it's outside those time frames, it needs to get removed because it's outdated information. So keep that in mind. Now, when it comes down to your credit accounts, if you guys have a spouse, if you're not an authorized user on their credit card or whatever accounts are listed, that should not be on your credit reports, okay? That is their account and is not yours. So make sure that's not on there. Any premarital debt that is your current spouse that's not yours, then you have to make sure that that is remove. Any inaccurate accounts. You say if you look on there, you see a negative account that's not yours, like a collection, that needs to be removed. It's prohibited from being on there. Any identity theft, basically, it had to be removed. So make sure you guys have that stuff removed. And make sure that all of your debts, if it's charged off, if it's completely charged off or if it's sold, make sure it's a zero balance and it's not saying that you still owe it. If you voluntarily surrender your car, make sure that it says that it was voluntarily surrendered and not just a repossession. So make sure that that's on there. If you close an account, sometimes you'll see that say the creditor closed the account. That's not true. Make sure it says that you closed the account because sometimes companies see this, that they'll see that they close an account on you. Oh, the creditor closed the account. Why would they close that account? It looks bad. So make sure that it reports correctly on there. Any adverse information that's so old, over 7 years, they need to come off of there. Especially, like I said, if it's bad information, they need to get that off your credit reports. If accounts have the incomplete or inaccurate payment history, you guys, that needs to be removed off there. If they're re-aging your collections, those accounts need to be removed. Now, when it comes down to your inquiries, if you did not authorize inquiry, it needs to be removed from your credit reports. Inquiries can lower your credit score, so you want to make sure that you remove these inquiries from your credit reports right away. If the inquiry is over 2 years, work on getting it removed, you can call the credit bureaus for any inquiries in your credit reports and ask them to get it removed. And usually they'll remove it over the phone. Okay, so make sure you just get these inquiries removed, because a lot of times, like I said, if you have these different accounts, it's holding it against, it's being held against you, and you just don't want to have these accounts on there, especially if it's not supposed to be on there. So make sure you guys do that. A lot of times, if you guys like go to a car dealership, you'll see that you have so many inquiries. If you did not authorize them to do those 30 inquiries that they did, you need to call the credit bureaus and let them know that you did not authorize them to do these inquiries, and they need to remove them right away. And sometimes they'll say, well, you only doing one inquiry in a certain they'll say we're going to do only one inquiry and they do 30, or they'll say, hey, you're shopping for a car, it's not going to hurt you that much. If you guys apply for certain credit cards, or if you're trying to get business funding, they don't want to see all those inquiries, so that is being held against you whether you know it or not. So make sure you guys call the credit bureaus, author credit bureaus, and tell them to remove it from your credit reports, because it is being held against you. Episode 33. So in this episode, we're going to talk about things that was prohibited from being reported to the credit bureaus during COVID-19. Now, the reason why I want to still talk about this, even though it's 2023, is because some people still need to go back and fix errors that's on their credit reports. So the first thing I want you guys to understand is that they could not report anything or any account as delinquent if you had some type of agreement with them. During that time, we was able to call them, set up some payment arrangements, maybe say, hey, I'm going to not pay my next 3 payments, set up any type of agreement. If you set up an agreement with them, they were not able to report you as delinquent. So definitely double check to see if they did report you as delinquent and you had an agreement, because you can double back and repair those different months, especially if they reported you as late. Now, they can continue to report you late if you were actually late. So like if you were late, January, February, March, going into COVID, then they can continue to report you late. They can keep that as you were delinquent. Okay. Now, they cannot mark you as continuously delinquent if you set up some type of agreement. So say if you were 60 days late, they can't say, oh, now she's 30 days, 120 days late, if you had an agreement. So if you set up an agreement with them, and you were technically 60 days late, they can continue to report you as 60 days late. Now, they have to stop reporting you as late if you ever become back current. So if you become current on those accounts, then they have to update that and put that you are current and you're not late. So those are a few things about the credit reporting during the COVID-19 times. It is different for everybody, you all, when it comes down to these accounts. But I just want you to know, if you have some type of agreement, please make sure you guys double check and see if they had any type of late payments or anything that hurt your credit. Episode 34 of Credit 101. So in this episode, we're going to talk about the fact that you can dispute inaccurate and incomplete information on your credit reports. So we're going to go over what you can do, what the credit bureaus have to do when you send disputes, and how that whole process works. So the first thing is, I want you to know, whenever you send a dispute, the credit bureaus have an option to reinvestigate that account, but basically investigate it, look into it, see if they want to delete it. And if they want to delete it, most likely they're going to reinvestigate it, look into it, or delete it in 3 days. So 3 days, usually they'll look at it and say, okay, you know what, this is supposed to come off, let me just take it off. Or they may say, hey, let me investigate it. Now, if they're going to delete it, they have to make sure they tell you within 3 days, and they have to make sure they do that by phone or written communication. And they have to make sure they provide those documents within 5 business days after they delete that account. So usually after you send a dispute to the credit bureaus, they'll send you a letter in the mail letting you know what accounts they're actually deleting from your credit reports. Now, if they're going to investigate it, they have to make sure that they investigate these accounts in 30 days. And if you guys get your credit reports from annualcreditreport.com, which I told you guys, I would rather you not do that. You guys can get your credit reports from Identity IQ with a $1 trial. I have that right below in the description on my YouTube channel. But you guys can be able to get your reports from them and not have to worry about the 15 additional days that you're giving the credit bureaus to actually investigate this account. So remember, if they don't investigate these accounts in enough time, say if they look at the account, they don't do anything, or the creditor don't respond, they're required to delete this account or these accounts, depending on how many you do, from your credit reports. Okay, so I tell people, try not to get your credit reports from Identity IQ to give them 15 additional days. Now, the next thing is they have to make sure that they contact the creditor, whoever the account is being reported by. They have to make sure that they contact them within 5 business days of actually receiving that dispute. Okay, and they have to make sure that if you send any information in with your dispute, they have to forward that to the creditor. That's another big thing. And then they'll provide whatever results is within 5 days of the completion. So they have to make sure that they provide those results. But again, that goes back to those 5 business days that they have to let you know about deletions. If they decide not to delete it, they have to let you know what the results are too within 5 business days. And then also, if you're trying to get this done faster and you're on the phone with them, send in your disputes. I always tell people, make sure you send them out certified. Send them out certified mail and call them and say, hey, I'm trying to get a mortgage. I'm trying to get a car. Because sometimes some reps will actually make it faster. They'll put a rush in for you. So just call and see if they can be able to do it. It's not guaranteed that they'll do it, but calling them won't hurt, especially if you do need to get this information rushed. You can also dispute your stuff online too, but I don't suggest it because you don't have a paper trail if you actually want to go ahead and sue the credit bureaus. But definitely contact an attorney about that. You can dispute certain things online. Maybe you have additional addresses and things like that. You can dispute that information online. That'll be fine. But I do suggest you just call the credit bureaus and tell them they need to remove this, okay? If you do have those different things. Again, I suggest that you do this by mail. Certified mail is going to be best in this situation. Now, we're going to talk about in the next episode, episode 35, what type of things you should put on your dispute letter. Like what type of reasons would you put on your dispute letter?